This is Oxford Circus.
I'm Sharon Brett Kelly, and I'm on one of the most famous shopping streets in the world, Oxford Street. I've just arrived here by tube. If you think that mainstream shopping is dead, well, you need to come here because it's a cold, grey, pretty grim midwinter Thursday morning, and there are plenty of people here, hundreds. I'm looking around me. It is busy, busy, busy. On the detail today, I'm here to find out how they've done it, how they have achieved this revival of Oxford Street. And if there's anything New Zealand's retailers on our main streets, or high streets as they call it here, if there's anything that they can learn from this. And here's a clue. It's something to do with getting rid of the cheap and nasty candy shops. So let's go and find out how this has happened and talk to some of the shoppers about why they're here. Hi, can I ask you a question?
We are not from here.
No, that's all right. Can I ask you why are you going shopping here?
Yes, we came because Naya wanted to come here for shopping. Good prices, very low prices, she said.
Where are you from?
Cyprus.
Okay.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think it's really nice.
The prices are
Yes,
very low.
especially in January.
So
Very good
you come
items.
for the bargains, and
Yes.
because why? Because there are big brands here?
Yes.
Why don't you just shop online?
We don't like shopping online. We prefer testing the clothes. It's better.
Hi, my name's Darren. I'm a journalist from New Zealand. And I'll ask you a quick question. What do you think about Oxford Street in general? Do you go shopping here?
I hate London.
What else do you want to know? Okay. Are you local?
Yeah, I live just there on Bernard Street.
Do you? What a fabulous location. So you know Oxford Street well. What do you think of it?
I think it's good. You know, it's going to be pedestrianised, isn't it, or not? Do you know that?
Are
Yeah, they're
they?
going to pedestrianise it. So all this is going.
Wow.
They tried to do it last year. I think they're doing it this year.
And you think that's a good thing?
Well, I don't know. We'll see where the buses go. They probably go straight past the house.
Yeah,
So we'll
yeah.
see. But it's always changing.
Just arrived this morning.
Did you?
Yes,
From
from Paris.
Oh, wow. Okay, so how does it compare with Paris?
In Paris, basically, you have more malls, like closed ones, like Westfields, and not so much like streets. And here it's like a lot of like streets where you can go shopping, so it's better because, yeah, as she said, you have space and like you can just breathe, because in Paris you cannot.
So I'm standing outside John Lewis. It's one of the famous department stores still here. This is the posh end of Oxford Street, he would say. What do you think? You've been shopping in John Lewis?
No.
Don't
meet
you?
my wife here.
Oh, you met your wife here. What do you think? They're talking about pedestrianising it, closing it off to vehicles. Do you think that might help?
Idea. Yeah. It's what it needs. Particularly beyond Oxford Circus that way, it needs revitalising. There's too many sort of pop-up shops, that sort of thing, really.
But we come down to Oxford Street at least once every other week or so. So
You do? And go shopping?
Yeah, and go to just have a browse around. Liberties, I like Liberties a lot. But yeah, Oxford Street is not what it was.
It's a run-down street now. I mean, what are you going to buy?
You know, well, there's lots of bargains.
I don't know. I mean, you go up the other end, it's a lot better. But this end is
Shabby.
yeah, shabby
Okay.
chic.
Thank you for talking to me. Bye. So, still a bit shabby according to that shopper, but this road that's in the heart of the West End and has been around since Roman times is still a big attraction for tourists and locals. More people walk along Oxford Street than any other main street in Europe. So let's find out more from a key player in the street's turnaround.
Oh, hi there, it's Sam Foyle, and I'm Global Head of Retail at Savills.
And Savills is?
Savills is a real estate company. I specialise day-to-day in the leasing on Oxford Street. I've represented tenants in the past, but I give landlords a lot of advice in terms of strategic advice, development advice, and leasing advice to tenants. And as a business, we're the leader in terms of the market share across Oxford Street and have been for a number of years. So we know it inside out.
Tell me what Oxford Street was like before this turnaround. Someone described it as a national embarrassment.
There were significant challenges for Oxford Street previously, and it was a number of factors that affected it. There was obviously the impact of online, which every high street and everything was seeing. The rents had moved on and were at a very high level. There was tax, which the tax increases and the tax that was payable was very antiquated model, and the valuations were sort of incorrect. So the retailers were paying a huge amount of tax on their properties as well. And there was also, at the same time, a lot of development that was coming through on this street. And when you have development coming through on the street, then that closes a lot of stores. And then on top of that, you had COVID that came in, that globally hit all of the major streets that had high footfall. The other thing that happened on Oxford Street was there's lots of different landlords. And when you've got lots of different landlords, they've all got different agendas because, I mean, these are high value properties. And, you know, everyone's got different pressures. There might be bank pressures on debt on properties that people have. There might be other landlords that are looking much more long term and will do rents at a lower level. So with that and those voids that came through, or vacancies, those landlords, if you've got an empty store, there are rates that still need to be paid, even if your store is empty after a certain period of time. And the only people that were looking at taking space at that time was a number of these candy stores, was the landlords were putting these temporary operators in. They didn't really have an alternative.
So I'm standing outside a shop called EGE, which is next to another shop called Rockaway. It's a little vacant tobacco store and then snacking kits. Basically a line of several shops, what they call these candy stores, where everything's cheap as chips, £1 for some horrible little souvenir, umbrellas, soft toys, and then lollies and chocolates inside. And these are the shops that people are blaming for the downturn of Oxford Street.
They're just like, I don't know, everyone says that they're to do with money laundering and they're not even real businesses type of. But they seem to have popped up everywhere. There's in Covent Garden and everywhere as well. But
Well, they're all legal, aren't they? They're just putting drug money through there. Yeah, there's no, obviously no one ever goes in there.
It transpired some were paying the rates, some weren't paying the rates anyway, those tenants, and there was a bit of an outcry on all these uses. And actually, the benefit of that happening was that it got the council and the government very involved in looking at, well, what is the problem with Oxford Street? We need to look at reducing the tax and the valuations on these buildings so the tax levels aren't as high. That happened, and with those taxes reduced and rents that came down and the developments then starting to come through and footfall coming back, there was a lot of reletting that took place. And actually, Oxford Street is now in a very good place, but there was a lot that happened in that period where we were very involved and looking at strategically landlords and what their plans were and helping them lease this space. And Oxford Street has changed dramatically.
Yeah.
In a whole different way than it was previously.
I mean, I'm looking at some figures, pretty impressive. 11 new brands on Oxford Street in 12 months.
Yeah, there would have been more than that, actually. I mean, we would have done 11 at least in that period. There must have been 20, 25 deals plus. The vacancy rates went from circa 13% to, I think they're at the moment currently around 2%.
Right.
So they're down to levels below before COVID now, and rents have been recovering as well.
Yeah, but how did you persuade these big brands to come back or come to Oxford Street when it was in such a bad way? And really, and frankly, around the world, you know, retail is in a bad way, particularly, as you say, hard hit by online. I mean, you know, a lot of us thought that high street shopping was on its way out.
We knew it was always going to come back. So these major streets if you look back in the decades gone by, they have highs and they have lows, particularly where there is a mixed ownership, where rents can move very high and then they come back. So we've seen big swings, and generally it's when there's big geopolitical and in economic recessions, etc., that you see these big impacts on the street. But this was the worst that had been for a long time, probably in its history. And the reality is we have got very good relationships with the retailers, and we knew that the footfall was coming back, and we needed just to walk the street with retailers and show them that there was an opportunity. And that opportunity was a once-in-a-generation opportunity to come onto the street in space that they would never historically have been able to even think that they were able to get previously. And that, alongside walking and touring the street with them, and them seeing the footfall and showing that retail's changed, and it's not just about the sale of product, it's marketing your brand and elevating your brand, where you can use the store for click and collect. You can really portray the great frontage of the space, where the planners had got a little bit more relaxed in terms of how the retailers could dress the stores from their frontages. So all of these areas, combined with investment that was coming from the council into the street, allowed us to speak to brands and encourage them that now was the right time to come and take a store. Uniqlo, for example, coming into the street, and they already had other stores, and they were concerned about how the store was going to recover. But we had a landlord that was very forward thinking and wanted the right sort of brand, who did a base and turnover structured deal, so that they brought the rent down for them, but they wanted a percentage of their turnover. So if the store does well, then it was a partnership. Both the retailer did well and the landlord was able to benefit from it. So that encouraged them. What happens? Uniqlo come in, trade incredibly well.
So you offered people rates cuts and tax cuts, or the council did, but getting rid of these American candy stores has been a big deal, I think. So how did you do that?
Well, those candy stores and souvenir stores were all on short-term leases, and the landlords were looking and waiting for when that opportunity to be able to get better tenants that weren't there previously. So once we started getting momentum on some of these buildings, we were able to encourage those landlords that there were now better deals to do. So it slowly built and developed. But the way you need to do it is you need to be walking the street with these brands and showing them the footfall and what could be done. And that was the way to do it. And the tax cuts obviously helped.
There is no street here in New Zealand like Oxford Street, obviously, but we do have some very high-profile main streets, Queen Street in Auckland, for example. What would you say to them, the retailers and the local governments here, that are really struggling with this problem of empty shops or cheap and nasty shops that have moved in and are a bit of a deterrent to other shoppers and potential retailers?
There's got to be a master plan. We're talking about Oxford Street, but if you look at London as a whole, a lot of the areas have got a theme in terms of what they are and what they're targeting. Oxford Street is targeting high footfall, predominantly mass market retail. Bond Street is luxury. You've got Marylebone High Street, which is a really good neighbourhood spread of aspirational brands, but really well thought through in terms of its neighbourhood and the residents that live in that area. You need to bring groups together, and those groups need to be talking, communicating and linking about what is the master plan for their area, whether they share in their marketing material, where they work alongside the government in terms of what are the longer term steps, whether it's pedestrianisation, but what are the themes of those areas? Which brands are they talking to, looking to bring? Because if it's just every landlord that's out with a vacant shop looking about, let's employ an agent to try and lease space for us, then everyone's chasing the same thing and there is no story. And so these high streets need to have a purpose and a point of difference, and they still absolutely have a place. That would be my key message. Have a master plan, know what you're doing.
Well, from Oxford Street to Queen Street, some similarities, a lot of differences. For example, we don't have the so-called American candy stores, but we have got these cheap stores, like I'm looking at one called Daiso Japan, where you can buy, I don't know, jandals, stuffed toys, a sun hat, a cheap umbrella. Is there a place for shops like this on Queen Street? I'm going to talk to Simon Wilson from the Herald, who knows a lot about what is going on here, to find out more and whether retailers here can learn anything from the Oxford Street revival in London. So, Simon, actually I've just been on Queen Street. I have to say, surprisingly, it's not as bad as I expected it to be.
I'm not surprised to hear you say that you think it's on the turn. The statistics bear that out. Retailers back at around 80% of where it was, and it actually got back to pre-COVID level before Christmas. There's an awful lot going on in Queen Street now that I think should give people real cause for hope. So down at that bottom end of town, things are flourishing. The next block has quite a lot of what people would recognise as international brands selling cosmetics and jewellery, so the Gucci and all those sorts of stores. And then when you move further up into the midtown area of Queen Street, there's a mix. So there are quite a few stores that are closed, and there are a couple of reasons for that. One is simply that the landlords are renovating to strengthen them for earthquake regulations, and they will reopen. Another one is that the retailers who were there weren't able to survive there, found a better place to go, or closed up altogether, and they haven't been replaced. So there is a midtown issue of not enough really good stores operating in that area. And then you go up a little bit further in Queen Street, you come to the Town Hall Aotea precinct area, which the council has liked to think of as an arts precinct. That's a little bit blighted because the St James site is a building site which isn't being built on. We are waiting to see what will happen there. Council will be receiving a report in a few weeks. There's some politicking going on behind the scenes there, and we don't yet know how it's going to play out. But if that starts to develop, then that area will develop as well.
Yeah, a bit mixed.
It's different. Yeah, it's very mixed, yeah.
There are quite a few cheap and nasty stores and quite a few still empty shops. And it was interesting on Oxford Street that they're slowly getting these cheap stores out of Oxford Street. Is there a push for the same kind of thing in Queen Street?
I think you've put your finger on one of the problems that Auckland planning has, and Queen Street in particular has, that the council would like things to happen, but doesn't seem to have a particularly strong mechanism for making them happen. A good comparison is with Wellington. If people know Wellington and think about Cuba Street, some decades ago, the council decided Cuba Street would become a thriving entertainment, nightlife, cafes, bars and restaurant precinct, and set about helping the landlords make that happen. Extremely successfully, I think. Council hasn't been active in the same way in Auckland. They've not seen it as their role to do quite the same thing. So a good example of that is they have widened the footpaths. They put in a lane that they thought would be for bikes and scooters and fast walkers. It tends to be kind of for slow walkers. But it more or less works. But at the same time, the council officials used to say, we envisage this much wider pedestrianised area will be used by cafes. And, I've been saying to them, which cafes are you thinking of?
Yeah.
Because Queen Street doesn't have cafes. It has very few. A proactive council would say we need cafes on Queen Street. If we want this whole renovation to really work, we need to be seeing a table and chairs outside culture, but they need to work with the landlords to make it happen. And that is not a lot of evidence that is happening at the moment. And that points to one of to my mind, the biggest single problem that Queen Street has.
Yeah, so are you saying that at the moment there are no real incentives that Auckland Council is offering to potential retailers or to get in there and set themselves up?
I've asked about it, and I'm not aware that there are any real incentives to help them do that. And incentives is one thing, You could have a carrot and stick thing. I mean, if a landlord leaves a shop empty for too long, maybe a little bit of stick might be in order, but carrots have to be part of that so that they do have the opportunity to be helped into doing their civic duty, if you like. If you own a shop, if you own a building with shops, you have to put people in the shops.
Yeah.
That's part of it. And the other part of it is imagination. So, Oxford Street at the moment has a major new modern art gallery. It's just opened. And it's a beacon. And that was helped to happen by the council. So, is the council talking to the Auckland Art Gallery? Is the council talking to Auckland Museum? Are they talking to Te Papa and saying, how do we bring what you've got into the street so that it enlivens the street, but also becomes a showcase for you and helps people see those things and go, gosh, I want to see more of that.
When you bring this up, people go, oh, what about what's happening on Broadway in Newmarket? And in a way, it's even sadder what's going on there, isn't it? I mean, that big shopping centre, which everybody loves to go to, it seems to have sucked the life out of Broadway.
There's two things that have happened in Newmarket. One of them is the giant new Westfield shopping mall. And the other thing is that the local business associations, the local businesses have been resolutely opposed to the idea that you should do anything to reduce the amount of traffic in Newmarket. So Broadway, which has the potential to be a really rather glorious semi-pedestrianised, I'm not suggesting get rid of all the cars by any means, but semi-pedestrianised shopping mecca, it is actually just a pollution-filled tunnel of buses and cars roaring up and down and making the place a menace. The good parallel for Broadway is Times Square in New York. They put in a plaza. They didn't stop the traffic, but they limited it, changed the whole place, and it thrives again. Broadway could do that, but it needs the leadership from the retailers to make it happen, because there's no point in going to war with them if they don't want it.
I thought that high street shopping, as they call it in the UK, which is really Main Street shopping, I thought the days, it was on its way out, it was dying, and that everyone was going to the mall. But it doesn't feel like that, actually, to me, after being on Oxford Street.
I would say that Oxford Street has an advantage of being a tourist mecca, but also London has a lot of people living in the city now, and that's going to be the key for Auckland as well. If more apartments are built in the central city, if council can help with that, if the government can help with building regulations so that it is easier than it is now. So if you're converting it back to residential, you don't necessarily want to have to put in all the facilities and services and strengthening that would be required in an office building. So the regulations need to reflect that. So there's a government role, there's a council role, there's a landlord role, and if people were able to embrace the idea that Queen Street could be a wonderful plaza-style mecca for people to shop, to hang out, to enjoy a cup of coffee, to go to a show, to go to a gallery, all of the things that can be fun to do in the city, we could have a really, really thriving main street.
Watch this space, I suppose, once again.
Well, some of us have been watching this space, and it is developing. It is far better than it was 5 years ago.
That's it for today. The Detail is a newsroom production supported by RNZ and New Zealand On Air. Thank you to Simon Wilson and Sam Foyle. This episode was produced by Adam Hollingworth and Gwen McClure and engineered by Jeremy Ansell. I'm Sharon Brett Kelly. Mā te wā.